Hey, welcome to this deep dive session on SAP Datasphere. Datasphere, the newly announced centerpiece within data and analytics stack of SAP, built around the concepts of data fabric and semantics. And in this session today, we're going to deep dive on the semantics and specifically on the analytical model. I'm not going to present alone. I'm super proud to have today two top experts with me. First of all, innovation lead, part of the leadership from Interdobs, Ronald Konijnenberg. Ronald, welcome. Thanks for attending. Ronald is a SAP mentor, very uniquely, and he's also the lead force when it comes to BW knowledge and knowledge around Datasphere. And second, with us today is Vice President in the Center of Excellence of SAP, Chris Pritchard. Chris brings over 20 years experience within analytics and database. Chris is going to talk specifically on the analytical model and do a deep dive session with you. Ronald will talk about a number of things Interdobs is doing, especially for customers running BW that want to adopt SAP Datasphere. Yeah? In the session, there's a constant chat open, and at the end, we will do a Q&A session. What we will also do before the end of Q&A session, we have a little panel discussions with some of the most obvious questions that we got from you that I will discuss together with Chris and Ronald. Enjoy. Let's have a look. For decades, companies are trying to combine and bring together core data to get insights and understand their business processes. Unfortunately, these data projects massively fail by the extraction and the complexity of replicating data. Let's look at an example of an order, for example. Order data is typically not stored in one table, but in multiple tables. Those tables have relations, they have currency settings, they have access controls, they have data row level security settings. All that information, we call that context, is lost when you replicate data from one source to another. So this context element is super complex for companies to manage and to get control of. Imagine that you can get control of the context of data, understanding relations, understanding who has access and who should have access to certain pieces of data, understanding where the data exactly is, understanding how tables are related. That would bring data projects, central data warehouses in a way more efficient and better position. Now, with the recent improvement and upcoming of cloud technology, this problem of context, understanding the context of data, even compounded, even got more complex. Typically, customers running multiple source systems now also have multiple hyperscalers. Try to combine data sources that are in the cloud with data sources that are on-premise. So this managing content, getting control of the context of data gets even more complex. Well, now imagine with Datasphere we bring a technology to the field that has this central semantics, that has a central layer of catalog that always respects the context of data. That is what we have done with accessing business data with SAP Datasphere. In our central catalog, we maintain the literacy of data. In our central catalog, we maintain the relations and the governance of the source data. We always understand those relations. We always respect the governance and maintain that in this central semantics layer where you can have a central place to monitor governance. This will greatly improve data efficiency, for example. Yeah? By centrally understanding what data to use, what is the correct data, who has access to it, and how are the different data elements related over the different tables, that is a massive improvement that we bring to the field with SAP Datasphere. Also having a central overview of all literacy, what exactly do all the KPI mean? What exactly is the meaning of certain source elements are super, super important. With this central catalog, we bring you a facility as part of Datasphere to monitor all your source data, bring it together, and build a central business layer for your users to create their insights. Typically, looking at an IT versus a business user perspective, there's always this kind of conflict of interest. Technology people will be very interested in mastering the governance from one place. Technology business people, on the opposite, are way more interested. Give me access to the central semantic. Give me access to data that I can trust so I can create my own insights. Well, we now bring these two needs together. In Datasphere, we bring a central data fabric that allows you to go all the solution path of data, from data ingestion, respecting persistency. You might want to persist data for performance reasons in certain ways, central orchestration with context in mind, providing a business layer for end users to do data discovery and have full access to governed data. The Datasphere setup is listed on this slide over here. As mentioned, we have access to any data from any source systems, whether it is SAP data or non-SAP data. By respecting that context, we also provide a central layer of trusted governance. People using Datasphere and the models coming out of Datasphere can trust the data. Our data flow and data persistency controls allow you to access data either live, federated, or near-time replicated, depending on your needs of your business. The central orchestration layer in Datasphere allows your administrators to always understand the right data and the relations between the data. And that, of course, brings the ability for your end users to do data discovery and have access to self-service modeling and analytics. With Datasphere, in summary, we provide access to governed business data. We enrich all data projects by allowing technical partnerships with core leading providers like Confluent, DataRobot, Databricks, and Colibra. And we build as such a central landscape for you to have governed access for your end users to understand the business and analyze a plan against our data. Now let's have a look a little bit more in that semantics and analytical model.
Thank you, Eva. And next we'll have a closer look at the semantic layer that is called the Analytic Model in SAP Datasphere. But let's first take a look what is in the Business Data Fabric. The Business Data Fabric is a new architectural paradigm for managing SAP data at scale inside organizations. It emphasizes decentralized architectures, business autonomy, and domain-driven principles to help manage the complexity and increase agility in data-driven organizations. And with SAP Datasphere, you can make data meaningful with a single business semantic service by unifying all the data through the business semantics. Datasphere is built on trusted data and strong definitions and goes beyond traditional data warehousing to provide a multi-cloud, multi-source business semantic service for enterprise analytics. With the evolution of Data Warehouse Cloud, we now have added some great enhancements. Data cataloging is a new feature that Eva already mentioned, that is the capability of creating and maintaining a metadata repository of all the data assets within an organization, which can be used to facilitate data discovery, governance, and collaboration. Also a new capability is the data replication feature. This is the process for copying data from one system to another, which can be useful for improving data availability or supporting distributed applications that require more data consistency across multiple cloud locations. And finally, we now have a new semantic modeling layer. This is the layer of abstraction between the physical data sources and the end users, which provide a unified and a business-friendly view of all data by taking away the complexity of the underlying data source. Here you have the high-level component architecture of SAP Datasphere. The layered data architecture approach is designed so that it involves separating the different functions of data processing into distinct layers, each with a specific purpose and a set of responsibilities. The business layer is for business user modeling and creating semantic artifacts on data, And the data layer is for relational models for the tables, joins and associations. The connectivity layer is for connecting to different data sources and APIs that can be reused for access with SAP or non-SAP applications. And then finally you have the spaces and the data sharing that departments and users can share data across the organization. So how does collaboration happen in business terms? In the business layer, users can standardize on business terms and terminology on commonly agreed language used within an organization to describe business entities, processes, activities, facilitating better communication and understanding or reusing data objects between different teams and departments while working independently from the IT. The business layer enables users to work on business questions like, what were the key margin drivers for my product? What if I reduce price by 10%? And in the data layer, the data relationships describe the associations and the connections between different data elements, providing a way to understand how the data is related and can be used together to derive insights and make more informed decisions. And in the data layer, you have questions that can be answered by the IT. How can I assure all my queries will perform with the data coming from heterogeneous data sources? So in SAP Datasphere, we now have a multidimensional, a semantically rich analytical modeling capability that helps to answer business questions easier, faster, and more efficiently. A multidimensional model is an analytical model that helps to organize data in a set of predefined and structured dimensions, such as time, geography, product, which can be used to slice and dice data in different ways to support complex analysis. Let's look into this a bit closer. With SAP Datasphere, we can solve complex modeling requirements by reusing semantical definitions and associations coming from SAP applications. With the new analytical model, Datasphere offers multiple modeling capabilities that address different personas, from business analysts with deep business understanding to techie-savvy developers or power users. In a typical end-to-end scenario, two closely related components of SAP Datasphere are applied. The analytical model is the go-to analytical consumption artifact, which is rich measure modeling capabilities, being able to flexibly collect user input and other advanced design features. And then SAP Analytic Model can reuse the context that Eva mentioned, the valuable information created in SAP source systems, by connecting to those applications and the rich metadata they can offer. In SAP Datasphere, you have a very rich capability for measure modeling by defining and creating measures or calculations in multidimensional models to perform aggregations and calculations on the data, which are used to answer business questions and support decision-making processes. You are able to design data consumption views that involve creating a simplified and a more business-focused view of the underlying data, with a clear attributes, measures, associated dimensions, and intuitive structure that makes it easy for end users to access and consume the data they need to make those informed decisions. And collecting user input prompts for filtering or calculation input in the user interface that allows end users to select, apply filters such as reference date to a data set, enabling them to refine and customize their views of the data based on their specific needs and preferences. The analytic model experience allows rich analytical modeling with less effort to answer business questions easier, faster, and more efficiently. Data can be represented in a preview mode in various formats, including pivoting and hierarchies. Working on time-dependent dimensions, also known as temporal data, is possible, which refers to data that changes over time and may require analysis or visualization that takes into account the temporal aspect of the data. Analytical model offers data lineage capabilities that users have the ability to track data, the origin and the movement and transformations of data throughout its life cycle, which is essential for data governance and data quality and compliance purposes. And we also offer migration support in Datasphere from the analytical dataset, using it on the analytical model. But you can use the analytical dataset as is today. So let's look at next how to create analytical models. First, we need to create a data layer, define all the dimensions and fact tables or views which are associated with them with each other. Next, we move to build the data model. We have already gone through the capabilities, but here we define them further. And thirdly, we can then take a look at the preview mode and confirm the data looks correct while applying filters and other features. And finally, we can then connect SAP Analytics Cloud to our model and start creating a story while reusing all the artifacts, and we're also able to connect other data sources if needed. This can obviously be done also already in the Datasphere modeling environment. With SAP Analytics Cloud, we have a full integration to the analytic model. With the new optimized design experience, users can continue to work in SAP Analytics Cloud by creating their own calculated measures and attributes without limitations. If you're using analytical datasets, these will continue to work as is, as I mentioned, and there is no mandatory migration to the analytic model. But if you decide to use the analytic model, your users will need to adapt their existing SAC stories. Now, let's look at a short demo of the analytical model. Here we start with opening an analytical model. We are in the data builder at the moment, and we're searching for an analytical model, and we see it opens up the analytical model section as per below screen. And this shows now a very simple analytic model with the fact source and two different dimensions connected to it. We have the product code and we have the product manager associated to the fact dimensions, and by clicking edit we see the product code and dimension, how they are associated with the product manager dimension. Now we'll move on to looking at, in the left-hand pane, we can have a look at the analytic model and we see the different measures that we have in our fact table. We have measures such as the closing stock, for example, which is a calculated measure derived on the available measures from the analytic dataset view that is connected to our analytic model. So we have an expression that we have put into the restricted measure that we can modify, and we can also create what we call restricted measures, and we have an example here as a restricted measure total. It's derived based from an in-transit measure from the original source, and it is restricted with the business unit category in the expression field. So we have built up two separate measures, which is calculated measure and a restricted measure, into our existing analytic model. So let's move on now to the preview mode. The analytic model preview is a great feature to analyze model data in an easy way. You have all the available objects in the builder pane, but first we need to select the business unit category. So before we open up the preview mode, we are prompted for the business unit category, and then it opens the preview mode with all the available objects in the builder pane. We can search for different dimensions and measures easily, and we have already, and moving those into our selection into the rows and columns for measures. And in the measures, we already have a set of measures predefined from the analytic model, but we want to add additional dimensions like material type, for example, in here. This can be done very easily from the builder pane. And let's add one more, storage location, as well into our preview mode. Now we want to add those created new measures in the analytic model and we want to also remove the measures that we don't need in our preview mode. So we can test here now the calculated measure and the restricted measure that we have created in the previous step. As you can see, when we are removing these different measures, we can see that the screen is constantly updating with the latest selection we have. And here we have the restricted measure total, and we have the closing stock measure, the calculated measures available. Now, if we minimize the available objects, we can see that we have those measures selected in the preview screen. So this is an easy way to confirm your data that the calculations are working, and we can also add additional elements here to better data visibility and confirmation. So the full scope of the analytical modeler contains a lot of functionality. So you can select the full view of the impact and the lineage, also from the top menu. So we can have a look at what data is connected to the analytic model. We have a single fact source that connects the dimensions and potentially different nested dimensions. We also have on the menu on the right hand side, you can see you have the measures taken from the fact source, the dimensions with the attributes and with the text, and even hierarchies that are associated with the dimensions. And at the bottom here, you have also variables for different use cases, for filtering input parameters, for restricted measures, and different types of use cases to restrict the final result. So let's move on to also looking a bit what we can offer as business expertise. Sometimes business expertise and knowledge has already been implemented for certain content and models. So it is good to check with the pre-built content what can it offer in terms of quick start for data models, semantic views and logic based on SAP application data. SAP constantly delivers these new content packages and enhancements to SAP Datasphere. Now over 250 packages available and ready to be imported. They will help to answer some of those analytical questions you may have based on operational source systems, such as material management, for example, is a good example that you would like to build your analytic model on. There may be pre-built data business content available to support the start of that project. Let's now have a look at the finance use case where BW Bridge, part of the SAP Datasphere, can enable faster time to value for business semantics. Typically, we have seen when we're building up business warehouse projects that it has a heavy reliance on IT. It is also relying heavily on third-party ETL tools, and data access can be difficult and extensive, and system landscapes can be complex, containing a lot of distributed data across SAP and non-SAP data. And the business challenge for a finance team sometimes needs to get a list of outstanding accounts from the ERP system to create a global geo view of the business. The old workflow would have been, in BW, the finance user asked IT to connect BW to ERP and use the extractors to create the process chain, ending with a BW query. They use a third-party ETL tool to export the list of external data store and merge it with the geospatial data to create a high-level global overview dashboard. The new workflow, however, with SAP Datasphere is that IT has moved the same extraction process chain to BW Bridge in SAP Datasphere. And the finance teams can access Datasphere finance space, which is then connected to the BW Bridge data, and they can connect their finance-owned SQL database to bring in the geospatial data and connect the two datasets in the financial space. And this will much more drive agility and growth and openness, and you're able to also utilize that data to other use cases such as machine learning and reduce risk in line of business driven data self-service. And now, moving on, I will hand it over to Ronald to explain the Interdobs integration to the cloud.
Thank you, Chris. Now let's talk a bit more about the BW Bridge and the BW Bridge Optimizer. So the BW Bridge Optimizer was born out of a necessity for clients to have a quick overview of what is happening in their on-prem BW system. So a lot of the on-prem BW systems are very heavy. So they have a ton of developments, custom codes, and lots of data, which is quite frankly redundant. So what the BW Interdobs Optimizer does, the Bridge Optimizer, it actually scans very quickly an existing BW system and then identifies which objects can be transferred to the BW Bridge. Our service consists of a couple of topics. So what we do is we actually look at all the BW statistics and figure out, okay, what is actually really in use by an end user. So which areas should be migrated and which ones are never touched, so do not have to be migrated. Also, we look, of course, in which info providers are in use. So do we really need all the advanced DSOs and composite providers, or can we do just a subsection of those? Then we look at the actual data content itself. So we look at the advanced DSOs and we look at the data which has been loaded. So for instance, if a certain user only actively uses 2 years of data, why do we need 9? So we keep the last 7 years in the old system. Which objects are empty? Which data and objects are truly dormant? So loaded once and never again, for instance. These are all items which you can basically leave behind in your old system. And the last part of our proposition is about transformations. That is very, very important because transformations is actually where the magic happens. So transformations have normally logic in them to derive certain business rules. And we actually are able to identify which tables are being used. Often in tooling that is overlooked. So you would migrate a reporting object, but you would forget about the underlying data structures. The BW Bridge Optimizer takes those into consideration as well. I have a small demo later on which will do exactly that and show you what it can do. And last but not least, and that's also a very important topic, is SAP Analytics Cloud. So what Chris already mentioned is the Analytic Model has a seamless integration with SAP Analytics Cloud. And we actually have a Kickstarter to quickly implement Analytics Cloud in your environment. So what we do is we look at best practices in terms of how should the visualizations look, what authorization should be implemented, what standards should be used. That's all part of the proposition. Now, back to the BW Bridge and the transformations, and let's look at some transformation logic in a system. So, what we actually see here is a quite technical screen. I will try to explain it as functional as possible. So, a very easy, simple lookup in a BW system would be a lookup into an advanced DSO. So, for instance, I have a sales item and I need to look up something in a different table. I would actually do that via a lookup. The BW Bridge Optimizer scans those objects and actually shows which ones are active. So a second topic is more sophisticated. That is the advanced AMDP lookup. So what the programs actually do, they scan the code in order to figure out which elements are required to migrate to the cloud. So not only do we do the simple objects, but also the more complex ones. So we are able to go into the transformation in a really in-depth way, figure out which lookups are actually in use, and then also list those in the program so that they will not be forgotten when we migrate into the BW Bridge. What we can also do, of course, is simplify the routines and the ABAP then. We do not have to migrate simply everything, but we can also do part of it. And this one is also very interesting because this actually lists all the data flows in the system which have a one-to-one relationship. So what happened in the past is that a lot of BW systems were just loaded with data from S4 or from ECC without any business logic. So those are very good candidates to actually keep in an S4 system and do not migrate those into the BW Bridge. Because it's then simpler to run them simply in the source system than to run them in the target system.
Thank you, Ronald. And to wrap it up for the presentation on SAP Datasphere semantic layer, I would leave you with some key takeaways. Analytic Model becomes the key consumption artifact for all channels. It allows for rich semantical modeling to answer business questions in an easier, faster and more efficient way. And it has a powerful capabilities to represent data and reuse that data artifacts from SAP source systems. And if you want to learn more, check out our SAP Roadmap Explorer for more information on the SAP Datasphere and the Analytic Model. And also, there's more information in our product pages, there's tutorials, there's the community and best practice recommendations, and obviously our official online documentation. So we just finished our presentation on SAP Datasphere Analytic Model. And I have a question for Ronald. You work a lot with SAP BW customers. How do they perceive the analytic model with BW?
They perceive it very well. So I think the biggest difference between the two is actually that in a BW system, things are very rigorous, right? So it's an IT-driven application. So end users normally don't really create BW queries or model themselves. And I think that has always been a big miss in the past. So that is now actually something, of course, which Datasphere brings. So all the, let's say, the scary IT stuff is being done under the hood. So the IT department can make the connections and also create the models. And then actually the business creates the analytic model and also, for instance, new calculated key figures or whatever, like you shown, Chris, which was a good example. And I think that is a major advantage compared to the past. So I think that is really something BW customers have been waiting for. Because it also seamlessly integrates with SAP Analytics Cloud, which is also perfect. So you can create a dashboard, but of course you also need a model. And by also giving that power to the business, then you have the full end-to-end cycle.
Thanks, Ronald. Eva, you mentioned in the presentation the data catalog. Yeah. How does that help our customers? And when you talk to customers, what do they say about the data catalog?
Yeah. So with data catalog, Chris, Ronald, we basically enter the world of lineage. Yeah? And maybe a few words on what I mean to say with that. So don't underestimate the complexity of the landscape that our customer sees. They typically have 10, 15, 20, even more source systems, on-premise, cloud. Then they all bring the data together, link it, blend it, formulas, and then they have typically thousands of reports on top of it. Now, what is lineage playing? Imagine that in one of those 15 source systems, one of the tables is down. Yeah? And you quickly want to know, what flows are affected, what reports are affected, basically what end user do I need to call saying your report doesn't work. Yeah? Well, that whole trace is what we call lineage. It goes two ways. Yeah? It also goes the other way around. Imagine you're using a dashboard and you notice that in one of the KPIs on the dashboard, there's a certain exception aggregation calculation not done properly. Well, you want to trace back in the flow what models, what formulas, what flows, what source systems the trace is from, so that you can quickly adapt. That is where we enter with lineage. This lineage, especially the bigger customers with complex systems, this is extremely well received quiz, and I'm very happy we enter this world right now. There's more to come. Yeah? So you talked about the roadmap, but this first step is utterly strong.
Thanks, Eva. Ronald, what do you see is the biggest difference in the business builder and the data builder now in SAP Datasphere?
Yeah, I think that the complexity is different. So, like I already mentioned, I think the business builder in itself was not the most user-friendly tool in the world, and I think with the analytic model, that bridge has really been crossed, let's say, to make it more user-friendly. Quite frankly, if you look at the business builder, it was never really perceived as a business tool. And with the analytic model, like you've shown Chris before, that really looks very powerful. And besides that, I think a lot of customers are also looking at and eagerly awaiting, let's say, all the new functionality which Datasphere has brought. I think the naming is very good because it's no longer a data warehouse, right? Because I think that's always what customers were thinking about. Is this a data warehouse? It's much more than that. And I think that actually the new naming really emphasizes that part. And personally, what I really like about the new functionality is the replication engine. So I have a lot of S4 public customers besides BW customers, and what they really like is the possibility to create quickly a data flow, including delta mechanism, let's say, to set up the tables in order to consume that later on in the data builder. And I think that's also a really big step forward. So, yeah, big kudos to SAP for adding the new functionality.
Thank you, Ronald. Eva, we have tons of new capabilities now in Datasphere. So what are we doing in user enablement and content that we're bringing?
Yep. Yep. So I think, this is all about, providing the knowledge to users and customers to start using best practices and leveraging Datasphere. And I think, the first, you already mentioned a few, Chris, yeah? So number one way go-to is of course the community, yeah? So where we constantly, so that is monitored by product management, by solution management, by the top experts. They answer questions, they provide new best practices and what have you. So that's one, and then of course webinars like these. But very interesting, Chris, is that in May we won Sapphire, and of course Datasphere will play a major role there. Yeah. So those are the more hardcore content pieces. If you look from another angle, content also as part of the product, yeah, we also have the business content, and over there we work well with Interdobs and all our big partners to provide pre-built content, develop it. That is not something that SAP only does herself. Yeah, we also work with our partners to get guidance or to get help with the development. And over there, Chris, it's a sine qua non. You can expect a ton over there to come, and hopefully at Sapphire we will do a second wave of things to share with our customers. So a lot to come.
Thanks, Eva. That's really good news. And thank you, gentlemen, for the good discussion.
Pleasure.
And we will now move on to the online chat. Please keep your questions coming. If you have any questions on SAP Datasphere, Analytic Model, we're happy to answer those. Thank you.